Today we're talking about Thoth. Surprisingly enough, in the last patch, pretty much his whole kit has been datamined, his whole kit has been leaked already, including the card art for him and all that stuff. So as always, shoutouts to Smite Datamining and Ferreo for allowing me to use this stuff. And with that, we'll jump into what information we have. This is a complete kit, including the passive, including all the stats and all that stuff. So it's massive by the standards what kind of data we usually get on gods beforehand. But as always, keep in mind, it's data mining, so this is all subject to change. This whole kit could be overhauled or Hyris could be trolling us. So what we know is Thoth deals magical damage and all his abilities basically indicate that he's gonna be a mage. I mean, obviously there's the Book of Thoth, which is already for mages, so it was kinda likely from the beginning that he's gonna be a mage as well, but we can be pretty much sure now. When we look at his basic attacks, there are two different values for that. One is 32 damage, one is 34 damage, plus 1.5 per level. Probably just testing around with the values there. There could be some interaction with something else as well, but it really shouldn't be anything major. Thoth's passive is called Book of the Dead. This is some kind of buff, and it is considered magical damage. Each time Thoth damages an enemy god, he opens his book to the page on which their name is written, describing the details of their death and allowing Thoth to ignore 15% of their magical protections. If one of Thoth's abilities damages multiple gods, the book is opened to the page of the first god damaged. So effectively, this is 15% penetration for Thoth only, and it only applies to the first target he hits. Not a crazy passive in my opinion, just something a little extra and maybe allowing him to delay percentage penetration. He can maybe build into more flat penetration early and then work his way around that. Or maybe just get tier 2 items with percentage penetration or percentage reduction. At the same time, you have to keep in mind that this already means that reduction is probably not going to work as well as this will probably apply after as penetration, I would at least assume. His skill number 1 is called Hieroglyphic Assault. It is also obviously magical as the rest of his abilities as well. It has a range of 55. Thoth rises into the air, ignoring the basic attack movement penalty and conjuring 4 hieroglyphs. His next 4 basic attacks pass through enemies and apply ability damage instead. If these attacks pass through the Glyph of Pain, the range is increased. We get to the Glyph of Pain later. The interesting thing here is that the basic attacks apply ability damage instead, which I don't really fully understand because every basic attacks at this point already deals magical damage, and I don't know where exactly the difference lies here. I could imagine this meaning that, for example, ability effects apply, such as Gem of Isolation, on his basic attacks. The damage per shot goes from 35 up to 115, plus 25% scaling, so if you hit all 4 shots, then you would deal 100% extra scaling and you would have roughly 460 damage on top of what you have. Cost of mana, it goes up to 80, 8-second cooldown, so that is very spammable and will allow him to clear wave quite easily as well. Skill number 2 is Speed Glyph. Thoth inscribes a glyph upon the ground which slows enemies who cross it and lasts for 3 seconds. Each time Thoth passes over the glyph, he dashes in the direction he is currently moving. The slow goes up to 40%, starting at 20, duration is 3 seconds, mana cost goes up to 80, and the cooldown starts at 19 seconds and goes down to 15 seconds. Now this is a pure utility ability, as it slows and gives you some kind of dash. I feel like it might be a little similar to how Terra's thing standing stones are on the ground. Or maybe it may just be a flat thing and it kind of accelerates you in one direction when you walk over it. Could definitely be really cool, but it's interesting to see that this is a pure utility thing. All in all, it reminds me a little bit of Jano's Threshold. However, that ability also has damage implications, while this one on its own doesn't. Skill number 3 is Glyph of Pain. From his book, Thoth conjures forth a hieroglyph in front of him. Thoth's projectiles and allied basic attacks, projectiles passing through the glyph, receive increased damage. So this gets some bonus damage of up to 35 and 10% of your magical power. It's not crazy, but it seems to be interesting as a mechanic because it really works with his whole kit of trying to work around these glyphs and placing them in the right places, and also obviously helps your allies at the same time. What is interesting here is that usually the abilities just, or the basics or whatever, just get increased damage, but in combination with this one, you also get increased range on the ability. So I imagine you maybe have to use the 1 and the 3 combined quite often. And the 3 also just has a 5-second cooldown. So while Thoth's damage numbers here are relatively low overall, a lot of his kit revolves around really spamming his abilities. With an 8-second cooldown or 5-second cooldown to begin with, if you get cooldown reduction on top of that, you can basically place this glyph at all time, and then obviously those small numbers add up because there's always some extra damage on you. The ultimate is called Final Judgment. This has a range of 100, so a little bit longer than everything else. Thoth begins summoning pages from his book, up to a maximum of 4. When all 4 have been summoned, he sends them forward, damaging all enemies in their path. Thoth may activate this ability again to fire the ability early, doing reduced damage and damage based on the number of the pages he has currently summoned. The damage starts at 360 and goes up to 680 plus 140% scaling, so quite impressive numbers there. I imagine it will take quite a while to fully charge up the ultimate, but it shouldn't take forever. I imagine maybe a little longer than a Janus ultimate, for example, because there are other mages with really high numbers and they usually don't have a crazy wind-up. However, keep in mind that he can also amplify his ultimate with his 3 at least, so there's some synergy there. This has a 90 mana cost and 75-second cooldown, so this is more of a raw burst ability, and that's actually the only raw burst ability in his kit. So what I find very interesting about the god so far is that, different from what we know when it comes to utility mages, we have stuff like Janus and Regen. And the joke with those was always like, you can call them utility mages if you want, but really they're not much about utility. They're about fuck bursts of damage. They have the added utility on top of that, and that's what makes them so valuable and never really pushes them completely out of the meta, as opposed to burst gods like Scylla, who don't have that utility on top of that. But with Thoth, we maybe actually see a mage that's more revolving around utility, and the approach here is clearly focused on putting an emphasis on cooldown reduction and providing more utility that way, while allowing him to still deal some damage, but just not focusing him around having a fuck ton of damage, and also amplifying his allies. Like, usually supports like Fafnir and stuff can do that, but not many mages can. So that's what we know about him so far. I think it's a very interesting kit, and we will see how much of this actually makes it onto live, but I have a feeling that this is quite, well, I wouldn't say final, but quite refined already, and there's quite a concept behind it, so it's going to be interesting to see. I could imagine the ult being changed, because right now it just seems like, whatever, Ra snipe, Janus snipe, Regen ranged ult, they all kind of find in the same category, and maybe they're going to make something more interesting out of that, but I don't know. We'll find out. That's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to see you all tomorrow. SLOTH, out.